Well, unpleasant topic today, but sometimes you have to look at unpleasant topics. I'm looking at addiction, anxiety and angst. Now, you would think that Australians should be the happiest people in the world. Well, in terms of the consumer goods, most of them are able to access. In terms of the fact that a great significant number can afford holidays, the fact they have a roof over their head, the fact that nobody's bombing us. But paradoxically, we have some huge problems. Whether they're manufactured or whether they're part and parcel of the type of society we live in is something we need to look at. Now, Australians have a reputation of having one of the highest addiction rates in the world, whether it's legal drugs or illegal drugs. I mean, it's no wonder our colleagues overseas are so keen to export cocaine and meth and whatever to Australian shores because they know there's a ready market. At the same time, we have one of the most anxious and angst-driven population in the world, especially amongst younger people. We've also seen the growth of a self-help industry, as well as a huge expansion in the mental health industry, especially in the private sector. So we should be asking ourselves some questions. Why do we find ourselves as a people in such a situation? What's the problem? Unfortunately, in Australia, we tend to see everything as personal problem. That it's some type of defect or fault with the individual. And most therapy revolves around individual change, whether it's through conversation, whether it's through medications. It's about individual change. Now, when you look at mental health statistics in terms of serious mental health issues, our percentage is no different to anywhere else in the world. In terms of people with major psychiatric disorders, major depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. And obviously when I'm speaking about addiction, anxiety and angst, obviously many people in this situation attempt to self-medicate through illegal or legal substances and become addicted to them. But this isn't the majority of the population. Why do we have anxiety rates of over 40% amongst young people? Why do we have significant suicide rates, especially amongst First Nations children? Why do we have so many people taking antidepressants? You find, I think we're the second highest consumers per capita of antidepressants in the world. I mean, that's not a statistic we're particularly proud of. Is it because we are looking for a individual medical solution, whether it's psychological or psychiatric or general practice? Or are we looking beyond this? Now, everybody is aware, although most of us seem to have forgotten, that poverty creates worse health outcomes as far as physical health is concerned in this country as well as anywhere else. So obviously if you don't have access to the right amount of food or the right type of food, you will have issues. And that is seen not as an individual issue but a community-wide issue. Although it can be seen as an individual issue in a private investment for profit society where although food is available, if you don't have the resources, you can't access it. But going back to anxiety and angst, depression, all these things which play such a significant role, we've seen over the last 20 to 30 years an explosion in the amount of charities, the amount of self-help groups, the amount of government advertising and intervention as far as mental health is concerned. And in the majority of cases we've pursued the idea that we need individual solutions to solve these issues. Now, individual solutions may ameliorate the issue, but they don't solve the issue. You don't solve the issue of somebody drowning by not teaching them to swim. Teaching them to swim gives them a better opportunity, or a better opportunity of actually not drowning. Although, it doesn't matter how good you swim, you can lose your life in some cases. But in the majority of cases, if you're able to swim, you understand the water, you've got a greater chance of survival. So what we need to be looking at is the structural issues which are creating so much anxiety and angst and depression in the population, especially amongst younger people. This is the first generation since the colonisation process began in 1788 in non-First Nations people, where health outcomes are going backwards, and they're going backwards mainly because of mental health issues, inability to cope, anxiety, and we can all put it down to social media. But it's not just a matter of social media. I mean, social media does make the problem worse, but it's not the cause of the problem. It's not the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem has occurred long before the introduction of social media in this country. And we've seen it grow and grow since the 1950s and the 1960s. Now, obviously, Australia, we like to think of Australia as the land of individual opportunity. But the fact is that, like in any society, only certain individuals are able to take advantage of that situation. In the majority of cases, the individuals who take advantage of the situation are those who've got support, whether it's financial support or family support. So getting back to the central issue of anxiety, angst, depression, addiction, what are the structural issues which promote these problems in us as a people? I am excluding First Nations people from this analysis because it's obvious that First Nations people are suffering intergenerational trauma because of dispossession, because of genocide. So obviously you would expect them to have a mental health impact on their lives. Having your children taken forcefully by the state, being forced to live a hand-to-mouth marginal existence. The list goes on and on. But what about the rest of the population? Now, we are a settler society. What that means in black and white is that we've dispossessed the original inhabitants and people have come from all corners of the world and set up a new society. Now, settler societies normally don't have a culture outside consumerism. This could be a major issue. The fact there is, apart from sport and consumerism, there's little culture. And I'm not talking about things like opera and ballet. I'm talking about a national culture, a national identity. Possibly the lack of a national identity in a settler society actually helps to create that anxiety and that angst. Then we've got the unresolved issue of colonisation. the unresolved issue of us actually, and we just saw it in the referendum, we've had the voice referendum, not able as a society to accept what happened. Now obviously, this does have an impact, whether it's conscious or unconscious. It has an impact on the type of people we become. Then we have the highly competitive type of society we live in. It's not competition itself is not the issue. The issue is that competition is not used to improve people's outcomes, but competition is forced on people in order to create profits for a shrinking number of people and a shrinking number of corporations. Then we have the no future generation concept. What's the future? What is the future? I remember when I was young, it was all about nuclear war. And us as a species destroying ourselves through sovereign nation states becoming involved in nuclear warfare. But the issues that people face today, and especially young people face today, are much more real and have a greater impact. And they're issues which we seem not to be able to grapple with because we live in a private investment for private profit society which is based on growth for growth's sake. It's only growth which creates profits. We can't even envisage an economic situation where growth is not the central engine room or the microchip of society. We can't even envisage that. So we've got these issues, these constant issues which there seems to be no solution to. Although I've recently come across a concept called solar punk, which is about, looking on the bright side. But the important thing is we do face, obviously the climate emergency has impacts on all of us, but it has greater impacts on those who are actually not able to afford to take up the new initiatives which are coming through the commercial marketplace in order to try to ameliorate the climate emergency. Air conditioning, solar panels, electric vehicles, and the list goes on and on. So the climate emergency is real. And unless we as a people are willing to tackle it, it hangs over younger generations' heads or necks, like, it hangs there constantly, which it creates that anxiety which comes from believing that nothing can change and that things will become worse. An interesting thing that we need to look at is food. The type of food we are eating. Although we're told to eat fresh, it's more expensive to eat fresh and it's more convenient to eat packaged food or pre-prepared food. And we have a whole billion dollar industry which has privatised food preparation in the home from breakfast to dinner. Now we've got a delivery system which perpetuates that issue. And we're seeing more and more research come out that highly processed food which is high in salt and sugar, has an impact on the intestinal biome. And that impact creates depressive illnesses, increases depressive illnesses, and increases a whole variety of issues which we have trouble tackling, like the increased rates of autism in our community, the increased rates of allergy in our community amongst young people. And the list goes on and on. So moving away from preparation of food in the home, using fresh food to this new system where it's prepared, it's ultra processed, and it's delivered to your door, is also contributing nationally to the angst and anxiety and depression we face, because we all remember the old adage, you are what you eat. And it's fascinating that in the 19th century, when you looked at cartoons, all the business owners were portrayed as fat people, and all the workers were portrayed as skinny, because that was the reality. There was only people who had resources who could actually eat the good food. Turn the clock 120 years forward, and it's exactly the opposite. It's pre-prepared, high salt, high sugar, mass-produced, ultra-processed food, which is causing the obesity epidemic, not just in this country but around the world, which is increasing anxiety and depressive illnesses. So there are general issues which are having an impact on us as a community, which have now combined to increase anxiety and angst, depression and addiction in our community, as people look for different ways to cope with things they really don't understand. Because every solution is an individual solution. That's what self-help groups are about. Every medical intervention is an individual intervention. For example, the greatest thing that's happened to the Western world is the introduction of sewerage. Any capital city in Australia, it was not unusual in the 1880s for half the children not to reach the age of 5. Today, it's a coroner's case if a child dies. It was only the introduction of sewerage in the 1880s and 1890s and the early 1900s which dramatically decreased the amount of people who died from preventable infective diseases. We also have a new phenomenon in the West where we have forgotten how important vaccination is, and we saw this in the pushback during COVID-19 and vaccination. It was vaccination which eliminated polio, diphtheria, decreased measles in our community. There are still adults walking around who have profoundly impacted by polio because no vaccination was available. So we have forgotten the importance of vaccination. We are a victim of our own success. So ultimately, we are seeing a combination of factors which have come together, which are combining to increase addiction, anxiety, angst and depression in our communities. Food, how it's produced. The fact that hyper competition to create profits. Insecurity. The fact that students who do a post-tertiary course are saddled with a HECS debt. The inability to acquire the great Australian dream. So a huge climate emergency. So there are huge issues that we face as a community. And as a Western society, where you are not spending every minute of every day trying to survive, we find that through the amplification of these problems through social media, we are finding that the impact, especially on younger Australians, is becoming more profound. Much more profound. There are no individual solutions to societal problems. Societal problems need political solutions, they need community solutions, they need societal solutions. And if it means making dramatic changes to the economic system which has placed us in this situation, those dramatic changes need to be made for the sake of the younger generations in our society.